Welcome to another episode of the Rabbi and the Therapist. Rabbi Hecht, today we're going to speak about illness. And it's unfortunately a part of our lives. There are many different kinds of illnesses. Some are very quick, some are unfortunately fatal, some are not necessarily fatal. There are people who have certain illnesses where they suffer a great deal over a long period of time. And there are many different ways that people react to being ill. Some really take it in stride, don't really talk about it, they live their lives. But there are others who can develop tremendous distress, which is when they call us for a consultation. But there are many who are looking for some kind of answer or some type of way to help them deal with what they're going through. And yes, there are interventions and medications which can be given to them depending on what they're going through. But in general, people are looking for larger answers because this is a larger question. I'm curious what, as a rabbi, you would tell someone.
I think the first thing we start off when we talk about illness is there has to be an appreciation for illness like everything else in life. Okay? When I say the word appreciation, I don't mean to say we love it and we want it and we're so happy, thank God. But we have to recognize the Medrash talks about illness and says how it is a blessing. Years ago, a person came to a certain point and they passed away. They just passed away. It was Jacob, our father Yaakov Avinu, who said to God, listen, we need to plan. People have to start getting old. They have to start getting ill. And this is, so simply put, illness sometimes helps us prepare for the future. One stage of blessing. And sometimes illness can be a situation where it gets us to make changes within ourselves, that we take care of ourselves better. Because I know myself, just simple thing like taking care of my weight. I had a situation, the doctor says, listen, you better start eating healthy. And therefore there are many things that we don't take care of, even of ourselves or people that we love around us, until, God forbid, illness strikes.
That's like a wake-up call.
Wake-up call.
Yeah. I will tell you, before I get to this other point, that I think that if someone comes in and has a very serious illness and your response is, it's a blessing.
No.
I don't know that they're going to want to see you again. But it actually reminds me, along the lines of it being a blessing, and you probably know this story better than I, because I believe it's a Hasidic story, but I believe the story is of this man whose name is Zusha, who is crying on his deathbed, and he was this righteous man, and his students say, why are you crying? And his response is that I'm frightened to go up in front of the panel of angelic judges, And they said, yeah, but what are you afraid of? You were such a righteous individual your whole life. And his response is that I didn't always show up as Zusha. And what that means is that when someone has the misfortune of becoming ill, you realize at that moment that life is not infinite and that you're forced to live in the moment. And being forced to live in the moment requires an authenticity about who you really are. And I think that is what the ill person is thinking. That is their state of mind. And that indeed, I would say, in some respects is a blessing, because it would be such a relief to let go of our unrealistic dreams of the future, or to let go of our past. Things that we regret that we did and that we didn't do. Which leads us to sort of the second part of this, which is, what do you do if you're a member of the clergy or a family member, a close friend, and now you're going to visit someone who's quite ill. What do you say? What do you say if they are not open to your visits? What do you say? What do you think they need? What do you do?
Okay, and I just wanted to bring one more dimension to
Sure.
it, and that is, how do you also deal with the person sitting in the chair next to the person lying in the bed? So I think the person lying in the bed, there's one thing we have to say, and I think I would like to address this, both rabbinic and psychologic, and also how we deal with the people around, the people, the loved ones, the caretakers as well. The first thing is, faith in God is always a good thing. And how much should I rely on faith? Well, I'm going to use the terminology, although we rely on faith up to a certain point, because Torah itself says you must rely on the doctors. So when you have a medical question, you should ask a doctor. And if it's a serious medical question, you ask a second doctor. And if both doctors have the same idea, same concepts, same opinion, then you go along with that. If there's a difference of opinion, you then go to a third doctor. And this was the Rebbe's advice to many, many people. If you need to follow the doctor. That's what Torah tells us. In fact, Torah tells us that from both sides. You need to listen to the doctor, but also the doctor is given permission to make changes. The doctor has God's permission to cure you. Because you say, well, if the illness came from God, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. No. God brought you upon illness, and then he wants you to go to the doctor, and the doctor is going to cure you, and you're going to continue living till 120 happy, healthy years. So, yes, but there has to be a certain amount of faith, there has to be a certain amount of prayer, and that faith and prayer has to be to know that, we can make changes. No matter what the doctor says, as the Rebbe told many people, doctors are there to bring health to you, not to tell you, God forbid, the other way. There can always be an improvement. Miracles do happen. And doctors will tell you that they have many, many times diagnosed one way, and guess what? A week later, the whole situation changed. A month later, the whole situation changed. So that is a very, very important factor. And prayer can make a change.
I will tell you that they actually study that. Patients who pray when they're in the hospital have far better outcomes than patients who do not pray. But let me throw a little wrench here. You can find two different types of responses in patients to illness. Some patients will, even if their entire lives have not paid attention to faith or religion, or all of a sudden they're faced with this, and all of a sudden they want to turn towards faith, right? And that also can be somewhat problematic, because then some of them end up having regrets that they waited until this moment to turn to God. You also see an opposite reaction, which is a very angry reaction, which is the moment at which people's faith in God is diminished precisely because they got sick. How would you respond to those two situations?
First of all, a person who believes in God and believes that God is in control, I sort of believe you can never get angry at God. He's in control. He understands the situation better. He looks at it at a more global view, and therefore sees a lot of things that you don't see. Number one. Number two is, the fact is, as you said before, and I think people have to understand that prayer changes the attitude of the patient. The attitude of the patient definitely plays a role in simply, number one, comfort, which is so very important, and number two, in the cure. People who believe, our organization has a project called Toys for Hospitalized Children, and their motto is, happy children heal faster. And that is true. If you're happy, if your attitude is, and if you have belief, if you can understand that this is something that God wants us. But as you mentioned before, when you're dealing, God forbid, with something end of life, particularly if it's a younger person, it is very, very difficult to deal with, number one, because of the person themselves, the ill person, and number two, the people around them. Which also brings to something else. What about the person, should we visit the person? Should we not visit the person? Should the person basically say, I want visitors or I don't want visitors? And if you tell somebody, don't visit me, I tell you, I don't want you to visit me, should you visit that person anyways? Does that add? Because the Talmud speaks about when you visit a person, you actually take away a little bit of their illness. That would basically encourage people to visit, besides the fact that it's a mitzvah to visit the sick. Bikur Cholim is a very big mitzvah. And there are great organizations within, particularly in the Orthodox community, that visit the sick. When my mother was in the nursing home for a little while, and daily people would come in, strangers would come in and visit and say, hey, how can we help? There was a part that was a little bit of annoying, but there was a part that, look how many people care and want to see if there's any way they can make it a little bit easier for the person who's sick or the family that's there to give support.
But let's talk now about the other side, to be realistic about this, which is there are a significant number of people who avoid contact with visiting the sick person. And you're aware of that.
The story that always sticks out of my mind with this situation is a young man who came to me and said to me, listen, my brother-in-law was diagnosed with something serious, okay? I still did not call my sister, and it's 3 weeks. 3 weeks since my brother-in-law was diagnosed. I don't know what to say to my sister. And my answer was, that's exactly what you should tell your sister. Sister, I love you. I don't know what to say to you. I'm not a doctor and I'm not God. I don't know what to say. I can't. All I can say is, I'm here for you. I care about you. I love you. And I'm here for you if you need me. By the way, I know personally, for me to visit, as a rabbi, to me to visit a sick person in the hospital is a difficulty. I have questions. I don't do very well with illness, but yet I have a brother who's a chaplain in the hospital, and he visits people every single day, many people every single day.
What do you think is the root cause? And then I'll tell you from a psychological perspective, but what do you think is the root reason why people avoid going to visit ill individuals?
There's an interesting Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says you don't want to visit a person in their hour of weakness. And I think there is something spiritual that goes on. So I don't want to see you in your hour of weakness. That could be spiritual weakness or physical weakness. So that's what I think. Maybe I'm a little bit naive, but that's the way it seems to me. I don't want to visit you when you're weak. I want to visit you when you're strong. I want to visit when you're energetic. I want to visit you in a way that I can give you strength and you can give me strength.
Well, that may have relevance, but certainly doesn't have relevance for people who are terminally ill who are not going to see the next day when they're stronger. There was a book written, must be 40 years ago, by Susan Sontag called Illness as Metaphor. And if my memory serves me right, she herself had gone through cancer. Maybe it was a relative of hers. And she wrote about the phenomenon with cancer that, and there was a time, and you probably remember this, when it was kind of a source of embarrassment. People that had it didn't want to talk about it. You kind of wanted to stay away from it. And I believe very frequently illness is metaphor. I had another idea that's more along the lines of what you do as opposed to what I do, because it's an odd phenomenon. From a psychological perspective, I'll tell you that the correct response is to actually confront the person or the family member and to say, number one, do you want me to visit? And if they do, then you have your answer. If they say not really, the next question is, I'd like to understand why, because I'd like to be here for you. And one step beyond that, something we were talking about earlier, is that you deprive an individual from being able to do the mitzvah of visiting someone sick, yeah? If you don't want them to come and visit you. I would inquire, why not? There's nothing wrong with that at all.
But I, unfortunately, was once in a sick bed in a hospital. I did not want anyone to visit me because it is my moments of weakness, and I'm not interested in anyone seeing, even people who love me and care about me. You know, this is not the time to visit me. You can visit me in my office next week when I'll be just fine.
I counter by saying that that was one particular incident, which you told me about. It was a non-fatal illness. There may not be another opportunity for some people. So that's that issue of, I don't want you to see me weak like this. Well, you may never see them again. So there's a limitation to that explanation. I sometimes have wondered whether things happen for a reason. And I'm reminded of something I learned during my training, that there was a rite of passage, still to this day actually, in an African tribe, where the process by which someone becomes a shaman, a healer, is that person has to be sort of sent out into the woods in a very sickly situation and be completely left alone. That there is a process which has to go on by which the person has to either heal themselves or be in touch with a higher power that heals them, or whatever the outcome. I kind of have wondered whether it's possible that the reason that we are perhaps reluctant to go see the ill person is that there's some kind of very ancient tradition or belief that the person needs to go through that experience on their own, which is not discompassionate, but potentially something that is inherited from many, many years back. Because as much as I've thought about the topic, I cannot come up or think of some type of rational, globally explanatory reason why we would not go visit people and give them our support at a time that they are weakened.
So to wrap it up, because the clock is ticking.
Yeah.
Let me say first of all, one of the stories we read about in the Bible, is about Abraham. Avraham Avinu is sick. God himself comes to visit him. And we know it is a very, very important mitzvah. Every morning in our davening, we start off with the Mishnah talking about visiting the sick. It's a very, very important thing. Right. But I think with that, you have to respect the person that you're going to visit. I think there is, like as you mentioned before, a big difference on a practical level if it's an illness that's going to last a week or a fatal illness because in a fatal illness, your visit to that person really says, not only do I care about you, but I care about the people around you. And God forbid, when the day comes, know that I am one of the people that will give support to your loved ones, to your spouse, to your children, to your family. And in that way, I'm going to be involved in being helpful. Therefore, you're giving that person tremendous chizuk, tremendous strength by knowing, because when their time comes, they want to know that things are going to be in place and their loved ones are going to be taken care of. And I think it's a very, very big difference than someone says, I'm having a bad day today, I'll see you tomorrow. Mm-hmm. I'll be out at a hospital, you'll come over, we'll have a cup of tea together, or have a game together, or study some Talmud together, whatever it may be.
Well, let's leave it this way, which I think is something that is parallel to both what you and I are saying. I really think the best approach, whether you're talking about talking directly to someone who has an illness or to those that are visiting the ill person, I think the best course of action is to be completely upfront and honest and open and say, I want to know what you're thinking. I'd like to visit you, but I want to know how you feel about that. What do you want to talk about? and not shy away from those questions. Because my deeper sense with the experience I have is that people will tell you what's on their mind if they know it's okay to tell you, and if you ask them, and you let them know that.
So once again, being honest is a very, very good policy. By the way, if you enjoyed what you watched, you can click on the bottom. You can reach out to us if you have any questions, any comments. We'd love to hear from you. And do tell your friends about the Rabbi and the Therapist. Hope you will join us for future programs.